Hello and welcome back to another Cultist Astronaut update. Today we're going to be taking a look at the editor side for our engine and talk a little bit about entities. So previously we did have entities working, but they were very granular, very component based, and the way they were placed in the scene was very difficult to interact with. We are exporting this data out of Unity into our own format and then loading that into our own engine. And when we do that export process, we're actually breaking up game objects into individual entities or sprite components. And so we had this issue where you couldn't actually move a group of sprites together. And I figured the way we were going about entities was all wrong. The component-based approach was really messy. It required a lot of back and forth hookup. And after doing some research, I came across some information on megastructs, which is a concept you can use to design your entity system. So instead of building convoluted components or ECS, which we don't really need for this game because we're not going to simulate, millions of objects, you put everything that an entity needs to do into the same struct, and essentially use bit flags to enable different code paths. And those code paths will, pull or update different variables within that megastruct. Now, we don't use entities for everything, so this megastruct may not actually be as big as it sounds. Like, for example, a tile map is not an entity. We don't consider this an entity. We also don't consider the world an entity. An entity is much smaller than that. It's very specific. It's usually related to an object in the scene, like this sawblade or this character. We actually have a couple other entities, like a rusty door, so I can actually spawn in this rusty door. And we also have a flayed peeler, which is another character. So for the most part, a lot of these things do share common attributes, especially between the flayed peeler and the player. But yeah, this makes programming a lot easier, right? I'm not actually battling with the structure of my entities. I'm thinking about the logic and the behavior that the entities have. And if there's ever an issue with optimization where we start seeing, oh, there's actually a problem with the characters and it's because there's just too much data or it's doing this the wrong way, then we can actually break that out into its own subsystem. So maybe characters are no longer entities. They become their own thing, like agents, or we just call them characters. But right now they're entities because that makes a lot of sense. And because of that, that means that technically I can make this saw blade move like a character, or I can make this door move like a character just by turning on certain flags and setting certain values. That also means I can set these things to player controlled, which means as long as they have character physics and they're player controlled, I can move this around as if it's a player. And actually, same thing with this peeler. I could make this thing player controlled. We haven't exposed all that in the entity editor yet, but it is stuff you can tweak in the actual file. So if we go to here and we take a look at an entity, like the player, you'll see the player has flags. This is a U64 integer that represents different states, and then we have all the variables here that the player needs in order to run. So yeah, you can see it has the spine renderer. This is its actual body, and it tells it which animations to start with and all of that. We have health, the input threshold. So yeah, a variety of these fields are used by the entity structure and by entity functions. If we go to the entity structure, you'll see what I mean by megastruct, right? We have this entity instance, and then we have all these variables. And basically grouping these variables by, not by object, but by behavior, which is so much better because you can start thinking about code rather than what does an object mean, which is where you can run into trouble when structuring your program. So back to the game here. So that is basically the approach we're taking here. And like I said, These entities are grouped together. So this sawblade is actually composed of 3 different parts. And we can actually see that by going to the actual textures. So in here, there's actually a text saw like PNG. And you can see it's composed of 3 parts, which means that there's 3 separate sprites that are rendered on top of each other using our layering system. But I can actually move all of these together because it's classified as a single entity. And I can do the same thing for the player, for the door, and for the character. So that's really nice. And yeah, I can hit play and I can run around. Right now you can jump on top of characters because the physics isn't set up correctly for that, but that is a work in progress. So, you know, that's pretty cool. And of course, one of the new things we have here is the create button, which maybe I can make this more intuitive, but right now it just like spawns multiple objects. Let me move that out of the way. You can spawn multiple objects basically in the center of the screen. So if I have, see, that's the last one. If I move my camera like over here, for example, and I do create, it will place it right at the center of my view. But yeah, if I hit play, all these guys will come raining down because they all have character physics. It looks like this guy landed on top of the other guy. Yep, and we'll be working on the AI soon. So this is like a great like first step towards that. And of course I can delete these entities. Maybe I just broke something here because now it's not letting me interact with them. Interesting. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that because it's no longer letting me click on those. But yeah, this is all a work in progress. So let's go to a new world and kind of show off like this whole process because that's the most exciting part, is like being able to create new worlds and edit the levels and place entities and connect them together and run around. So yeah, like before, you can create new rooms. Here's like a standard room size that I want. I can actually change the settings here, but we're going to keep it as is. I'm going to edit the tile map. I like using this rectangular tool because it lets me do mass painting and also mass erasing. So just like that, I have, you know, a room. Let me make some space here for a door. So let's say we have that, and then let's spawn a player. Oops, and that's another thing, right, is like I can do this and it paints tiles and moves the characters. So some state stuff needs to be worked out, but for now I can just close the tile editor and that works great. Of course I can double click in here and I can type in numbers, which is awesome. And just like that, we have a room we can run around in. So I had to like reorganize the code a bit to regenerate physics. So like for example, let's say I pause right here and I want to add, oops, is it gonna freeze up on me? Oh, weird, it won't let me interact with the, oh, because I was clicking there. Okay. Gotta hit enter, man. So like, let's say I want to pause here and then I want to paint in a platform. You can see that it worked. The physics updated, right? Which wasn't a thing before, right? When I painted new tiles, you actually would fall through the new tiles because we only generated the collision once. So that's really cool. And you can see it works for erasing as well. I can add more rooms. So let's add a new room. Let's make this one a bit bigger. And let's apply that. And then we'll do, let's edit that new tile map. So some of the workflow could be improved, right? Maybe that little like room editor that opens up when you create a new room, maybe it like shows you the tile editor, or lets you open the tile editor from there so you don't have to do like any like weird stuff. Let's do that, and then let's add some platforms. So yeah, you can just like easily come in here, make new levels, and do your thing. So yeah, and not only that, right, if I wanted to switch to a different tile like the Excoriate tile where we have like quite a bit to work with here, I can do that. Like let's say I want this room to be like a reddish color and I want to use this for like some of the the tiles. That's a bit dark. Maybe we brighten that up. Yeah, very red. We can do that, right? We can come in here and paint new stuff. If I want to, I can you know, edit other things like the trim. So Excoria has a bunch of trim we can use. So if I wanted to paint in some like white trim on this wall, I can do that. This is the double-sided trim. That's the wrong one. I think I wanted this one. Oops. So I can do that, and it's all layered, right? So I'm painting on top of the other tile map. Now, if I want to connect these two rooms together, I can actually create these rusty doors. Set their positions. I'm going to actually make this so that if you hold down like maybe Control, you can like click and drag this and it will snap to the grid. Maybe like on 0.5. That seems to be a pretty general number that we use for Cultist Astronaut, at least in Unity. And that will save some time here with having to type it in. And then let's put one over here. Very red room. I'm not trying to make a pretty level, by the way. Like, I'm not trying very hard. So yeah, I can create those doors and position them. I have this link button, which makes it easy for me to just like highlight a door and link them together. So you can see now they're hooked up. And if I run over here, I can go through the doors. Right now it's very instant because we don't have any transitions like we do in the Unity version. But yeah, I can run through the game and explore my new level. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And just like before, if I want to, I can add some enemies to the level. Right now they don't have any AI, but imagine, you know, they do. I can jump in and test that out. So everything here is designed for fast iteration, right? I want to be able to jump in and out and add new things to interact with on the fly. Maybe I don't like the position of this this platform, right? So I can come in here, edit the ground, and just like delete a couple things and be like, no, you only get like this one block, because maybe I feel that is better game design. Thought maybe I could jump through that, but it's just that his collider is smaller than his body, so there's some stuff to work out. Yeah, that is the progress for this week. Also, to kind of like finish this up, so what we're doing is we are storing the entities as separate files, which is very useful for instantiation. So instead of like copying and pasting the same entity code over and over, what we do is we actually store them into separate files. So let me just go to the asset index, and then we'll go to the player. You'll see here, this is all the player data, right? And I have kind of the same thing for the sawblade, although it specifies more sprites. And then of course, if we go to the rusty door, you'll see it has 2 sprites, and it has some data about rooms. And then in the asset database, we actually store those 4 entities, and we refer to them by file path. And the reason we have this asset database is because it allows us to reference things by ID, which is going to be very useful later on when we have to package everything up into binaries. Right now, we're like interpreting text files when we load the game. Later on, we're going to be reading in binaries, and we're going to be referencing certain binary chunks using this IDing system. So if I go to like the world, for example, the world we've been loading, which is another text file, you'll see here it like specifies some information about where the player starts, what room they're in. Here's all the room data, which again, these are asset IDs. So if I go to the asset index and I look up, for example, ID, let's do ID 166, which is this one right here. You'll see it points to this room asset, which is located in this file. And I can't display this because it contains like binary data. But it has information about like how the tile maps are formed and how things are positioned. And basically when we load a world, we load all the rooms using these different IDs. And then we have entities down here. So as you can see here, we refer to entity ID 1. This is the ID in the world. So if I have two entities in the world and they have to refer to each other, they use this ID. So when I linked those two teleporters together, they're using world IDs to figure out how they're connected. And then we have the asset ID, which is like the data that I need to load in order to instantiate this like asset or this entity, right? So going back to the index and looking up ID 190, what is that, 190? You'll see that it points to the player. So this is basically equivalent to this, except we're using an ID to load that specific file. And the code has been optimized so that if I load the player once and then I load it again, it doesn't like reload that file. It just makes a copy. And so when I spam the room with like 10 saw blades, they're all being instantiated from the same data, which is part of the asset database. And this reduces the world file size. As you can see, like instead of having to do basically this, which theoretically you could do, we bake it down to an asset reference. And Unity does something similar with prefabs. So we have that same pattern here. All right, yeah, as always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And yeah, have a nice day. See you in the next video.